All right, hello again. Dr. Andrew Von Plitt here with another live Q&A session. Try not to bump my computer too much here. If you are new here, this channel is where I post videos, instruction videos for Tai Chi and Qigong. And if you would like a more organized setup for seeing those videos and the teaching material I have available, you can go to andrewplitt.com and check that out. I'm also a naturopathic doctor in the Portland, Oregon area, and I have a website, Dr. Von Plitt, that's drvonplitt.com, where you can find out more about that if you're interested. So I'm just going to answer, looks like I got one or two questions since my live stream yesterday, so I'm going to answer those, respond to some comments. Also going to talk a little bit more about Tai Chi training curriculum. I had several questions about that in the past. I've talked about it in previous videos, but in this video, I'm going to talk about it from Yang Chung Fu's perspective. So that will be a nice source of information. The information I'm going to be using is coming from this book, which I've shown many times already. So this is Mastering Yang Style Taijiquan by Fu Zhongwen. Great resource, a lot of great information for Yang Style Taiji practitioners. If you are interested in getting a copy of that book, there is a link down in the video description, so you can get a copy there. It is an affiliate link, so it does support this channel and what I do here. You, of course, don't have to use that link. You can get it anywhere you can find it, but I do appreciate it if you use the link. So I am going to move on with that to our comments and questions. So first comment comes from Smooth Buddha. This is on the last Q&A session that I did yesterday. And Smooth Buddha just says, thank you so much for answering my question. Much appreciated. You are so welcome, Smooth Buddha. I'm glad that the answer that you got was useful for you. And it's my pleasure to answer these questions. So thanks for leaving the questions. Let's move on to the next comment. This one is on one of the Taiji 24 form videos, connecting moves 1 through 9. This video is from Kim Barrows. And Kim says, this is so incredibly helpful. Thank you so much for putting these moves together and making the movements clear as we go along. Greatly appreciated. Well, I'm glad to hear that this is, the connecting move videos are useful for you. I can't take credit for that idea. I had never considered making those kinds of videos that would show connecting the movements together. To me, it made perfect sense to just show the movement and then show the next movement. And of course, they would go together because that's what made sense to me. And I got feedback from students and I got feedback from people on YouTube saying, what would be really nice is if you actually made videos where we could see how this all goes together. So it's not my idea. It was coming from students who had more brilliant ideas than I did. So I can't take credit for it, but I am glad to hear that it's useful for you, Kim. I'm so glad to hear that you're enjoying those videos. So thank you for leaving the comment. Keep up the good work in your training. Let's see. Next comment is on one of the Taiji 24 form self-defense videos. So it's basically a video that shows some of the applications for the Taiji 24 form, the martial arts applications, that is. This one's from Tony Rodriguez. And Tony says, simple and effective. So it seems like Tony enjoyed that application from that video. Thanks for the comment, Tony. Glad you enjoyed the video and the application. Let's see. This next one is from another live Q&A session that I did. It looks like the one that I did yesterday. This one's also from Smooth Buddha. And Smooth Buddha says, I have a question about muscle memory in the movement and forms. When I practice, I've noticed sometimes my body can just perform some of the movements and the forms without much effort, but sometimes I feel like I fall into the trap of performing certain movements identically every time. And although the movements look correct, it doesn't feel as mindful because it was just muscle memory. Every once in a while, I lost my spot. Every once in a while, I may do a movement and it feels fresh, even though the movement is the same. The movement is the same. It felt new. Okay, so what you're saying there. So the movement was the same as you've done it before, but it felt new. And here comes the question. Should we rely on muscle memory or should we aim for our movements and the forms to always feel new and different? Hope this makes sense. I know this is a strange question, not strange at all. And says, I tend to overthink and overanalyze. So thinking deeply on what you're doing is not a bad thing, especially when you're doing something new, because that really helps you find where the errors are and where things can be improved. Um, I don't think this is a strange question at all. I think this is a great question. So let's jump into it. It's a mixture of both, really. I wouldn't say, let's see, should the moves feel new or different every time you do it? That's an interesting question. I would say, especially in the beginning, no, they should not feel different. Them feeling basically identical is a good thing because what you're wanting to do, and identical if they're being done correctly, that is, identical is a good thing because basically it's allowing you to get the sort of idealized movement in place in your muscle memory, in your movement patterns of your body. Um, and I've talked about in previous videos that really when you do forms, what you're going for is the essence of the movement. When you apply it in partner training, it's not that you're trying to repeat things exactly as you do it in the form. But when you are doing the form, it's a good idea to try to do it the same way, especially in the beginning each time, because really what you're trying to do is eliminate as many outside changes while you're solidifying your internal frame, your internal structure. So the thing that you don't want to do is it sounds like sometimes you just kind of go through the movements without really being engaged in the movements. And that's a little bit different from it being different every time or new every time. You do want to be engaged, but the engagement should be a full body awareness and motion and maintaining the Taiji principles. So you're making sure all of those things are in place. And that is something you have to do very consciously, especially in the beginning, because it's not something that just comes naturally to most people. And you want to make sure those things are in place to make sure that your taiji is good taiji, that you're developing good skills with it and you're not just doing movements. And so kind of the benefit of the muscle memory, and you do want muscle memory because you don't want to have to think about the movement every time you do it, like trying to remember the movement. You want your body to just be able to do the movement, right? And the benefit of the muscle memory is that you can think deeper on the movement after the muscle memory is in place. So the muscle memory shouldn't be something that comes in and takes the place of the deeper work that you're doing with Tai Chi. It's what provides the scaffolding that supports that deeper work. So until you have the muscle memory, you're not going to be able to really be as efficient with your deeper work in your Tai Chi training because you're still figuring out where things go and you're still trying to, do the same thing that you did the last time you did the form. Once you have the form down externally, and that means you know where everything goes and you could do it without thinking about it, that's really great because that allows you to then take the mental energy that you were putting into remembering what the next move was, where the hand goes next. Was it palm up? Was it palm down? Do I step with the left? Is it forward? Is it to the right? All those things that are typically going on when you're first learning the form and it makes the form feel really difficult, those go on autopilot. And that's wonderful. You want that because then what you do after those things are on autopilot is you can go deeper into the movement, you can go deeper into the form. And you also want the structure of the body, that internal framework of Tai Chi, and those principles of Tai Chi also to go on autopilot at some point. You don't want to constantly be having to remind yourself, oh yeah, I need to do this. Oh yeah, I need to, make sure I have the expansion through the spine. I need to make sure that the shoulders are relaxed, the chest is sunk, the back is raised, all those kinds of things. You don't want to constantly be having to mentally make yourself do those things. You want your body to fall into that mode automatically. And that's, same thing. Once that goes on autopilot, then you can go deeper and focus on the more, not minute, but the more like detailed aspects of the internal work of Tai Chi. So I wouldn't say it should feel new and different every time you do it, especially in the beginning. It should feel very similar, and you should be aiming for doing it the same way every time, especially as you're learning it until it goes on autopilot and you can do it the same way every time. And then as you go deeper into like the internal aspects of your training, working on the silk rilling, working on the alignment, working on the frame and the structure and everything, making sure that it's all where it's supposed to be, and that central equilibrium, and tying that into partner training so that you know you're doing it right, and your partner is your test to let you know either you're doing it right or you think you're doing it right and you need to work on some more things. Um, that you can just keep going deeper on the details of those things, but I would say autopilot is a good thing. And after you kind of like years down the road, after you've been doing it for a very long time, um, then it's a good thing, I think, to look at a lot more variations of the movement and to look at um, expressing the intent of the movement without necessarily expressing the exact structure that you started with for the movement. And that's something that I think a lot of times it's very easy to want to jump to that step before a lot of the foundational work has been done. And you don't want to do that because then the benefits of that are not going to be available. The foundational work is the most important part of it, and the variations will come. The understanding of the real essence of the movement and being able to apply that in different ways will come with time. But I wouldn't say strive for that. I would say strive for the basics, strive for the understanding, the internal understanding, the structure of the frame, and letting all those things kind of go to autopilot so that you can really work on refining the internal components. So I think that answers your question. I hope that was useful for you. Overthinking, overanalyzing, when you're learning something new, like I said at the beginning, that can be very helpful. And the upside of things going toward more autopilot is that you can let some of that go. And that is something you do want to kind of let go of, especially when you're doing your training for. So we'll say you're learning, the first move of the 24 form, first move of any Tai Chi form, you do begin Tai Chi. If you're learning that movement, um, basically you would want to do that until you get your autopilot engaged on that, right? And then you can learn the next movement and let those like kind of go into muscle memory. I lost my train of thought there, so I had a great idea of what I was going to say about that and totally lost it. So we're just going to leave that there. I think I answered your question. I hope it makes sense to you. What I said, I hope it's useful for you. Thank you so much for your question, Smooth Buddha. And if I remember what it was that I was going to say there, then I'll come back to it. So let's see. Next comment is from Kirk Mills. Kirk Mills is a supporting member for this channel. Thank you so much, Kirk, for being a supporting member of this channel. Really appreciate it, and really appreciate all the supporting members out there. Thank you for your support. Let's see. Kirk Mills is commenting on a previous live stream Q&A session. Looks like it was the last one that I did here. Kirk says, perfect question answered. Again, thank you. I feel a lot better moving forward with your advice. I am definitely not a kid, so it makes sense to not do standing post for a year at 48. Yeah. I will incorporate your points and suggestions together. So glad to hear that was helpful for you. Glad to hear it made sense. For those of you who didn't see the previous video, the question was something to the effect of what's the traditional approach to training, and how would you go about doing that traditional approach? And the discussion was basically around that idea of this traditional approach to training and some of the reasons why it was done, and why it might not be the ideal thing to do if you aren't starting training as a kid. It may be a more ideal thing to do if you're starting as a kid, but for most of us, we aren't starting as children in these arts, and so you can do a little bit more of a modernized version of training, and I don't think it's detrimental to your training. So I'm glad that was useful for you, Kirk. Keep up the good work. Thanks for the comment, and thanks again for being a supporting member. We are going to move on to a comment on Taiji 24 form connecting moves 1 through 24. So this is the last video in that series that puts all the movements together. This one is from Anne Blair and says, thank you, best instruction I found so far. Anne, you are so welcome. Thank you for the comment. I'm always happy to hear when people are getting benefit from the videos I put out, and it's wonderful to hear that you are getting benefits from these videos. So thank you for the comment. Glad to hear it's helping. Let's take a quick look to see if there are any other comments that I have missed. I don't think so. I'm going to check one more spot here. Doesn't look like it. I think all the comments are... Oh, I think I did miss one. It's interesting to me how YouTube shows comments. Sometimes it's very straightforward, and then sometimes they're kind of what I would consider hidden. So I check a couple different spots on YouTube, both in like the studio area and on like my YouTube page, so that I hopefully don't miss too many comments. So this one I think I have not gotten to yet. Oh, well, I think actually that comment was deleted or is no longer there, and that's why it wasn't showing up in the studio. So, all right. So we won't bother with that one because I can't actually see the whole comment right now. All right. So what I wanted to move on to next is based kind of springboarding off of what we just talked about with Kirk's comment and his question in the previous video. Yeah, the video. If my mouth will cooperate with me, which it doesn't seem to want to do today. This idea of kind of a traditional approach to training and a traditional curriculum. So I wanted to get into Yang Chung Fu's take on this, and hopefully this is something that is useful for you all. And then I'll wrap things up. So again, this is coming from this book, The Mastering Yang Style Tai Chi, and I am looking at page 15. So if any of you have this book, you can grab it and follow along, or look at this later if you feel like it. So, and this is something that was dictated by Yang Chung Fu. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Yang Chung Fu, I know that I've talked about Yang Chung Fu several times. I guess I'm not going to get into this just yet. I'm going to talk about Yang Chung Fu. I know that I've mentioned him several times on this channel, and especially in the live stream videos. And I have just assumed that everyone knows who I'm talking about when I say Yang Chung Fu, and I should realize that not everyone geeks out about Tai Chi on the same level. So a very brief summary of Yang Chung Fu is basically he is the person that is, I would say, primarily responsible for the popularity of Tai Chi outside of specific family lineages. And what I mean by that is for a very long time with Taiji, well, go back as far as like Chen style Tai Chi, the original form of Tai Chi, that was only taught to Chen family members. No one outside the family could learn that. And then came Yang Lu Chan, and he learned that style, and he was not allowed to teach that style to anyone. And so he adopted it into his own version of Taiji, which he named after himself, Yang. So Yang style became born at that point. And down the line, Yang Chung Fu was one of the family members who learned Yang style Tai Chi. And he, from what I've read, from what I understand, changed it to be a little bit more, I guess you could say, user friendly to the general public. And he taught it openly. He was one of the first teachers to do that, teaching it openly to anyone who wanted to learn it. And he also is one of the first teachers who emphasized the health benefits of it rather than just the martial aspects. So he would teach people who probably wouldn't be accepted to a martial arts school because they weren't fit enough or weren't healthy enough, whatever. And he would teach them, and he noticed that they would improve their health through their training. And he thought that was pretty cool. They probably thought that was pretty cool too. And because of his openness in teaching and the popularity that came from that, his version of the Yang form became probably the most practiced version of Taiji worldwide for quite a while. I would say probably, well, this is a guess here. I don't actually know this, but I would say probably till the 24 form came along, which I believe is the most popular form at the moment around the world. But anyway, he is someone who opened up the world of Tai Chi to people who wouldn't have had access before, and he's one of the main reasons why so many people know about Tai Chi around the world. And that's one of the reasons why his form, or the Yang family kind of standardized form that's taught right now, is considered as close to his form as possible. That Yang Chung Fu form, that kind of standardized long form. The reason that basically everyone knows that as the long form, with some exceptions, variations, is that he basically was able to popularize it so well. So he's considered, someone who was very skillful in Tai Chi, someone who definitely understood it well. And his 10 principles of Tai Chi are things that most people know. I mentioned those a few times. Those are in that book as well. And he also has other thoughts that he dictated about the practice of Tai Chi that are in this book as well. So that's a little background on Yang Chung Fu, why he is an important figure in Tai Chi, at least one of the reasons why he's important. And so now you know who's talking when we get into this a little bit. So again, we're at page 15 in this book, and it says the Taijiquan curriculum begins with the practice of Taiji hand set, followed by single hand pushing circuit, fixed step pushing hands, active step pushing hands, Dalu, and Sanshou. So basically, he's saying that in his curriculum, he starts people at the empty hand set. So the long form is basically where people started when he was teaching them. And again, this is one perspective on training. I think it's a very valuable one. Um, it's not the only one. Of course, there are many teachers out there who say, no, you need to do standing post Qigong first. And then there's others who approach it in many different ways. But so his approach was start with the empty hand routine and follow that with push hands, both the single, then the more advanced versions of push hands, like the large rollback, etc. Let's see. Then comes implements training. So basically weapons training, such as the Tai Chi sword, the Dao or the broadsword, the spear, and so forth. So the way that he structured it was empty hand, partner training, and then weapons. And yesterday when I was talking, I was saying that some schools do empty hands, weapons, and then partner training. There's lots of variations out there, but I thought it was interesting that he put it in that order, and I wanted to share that with you. And then he also goes on to say regarding practice times, each day practice twice upon getting up from bed. If there is no time in the morning, then practice twice before retiring. So his approach to training was just you go through the form twice. You get up, you do it twice, and that's your training for the day. Or if you can't do it in the morning, then you do it twice before going to bed. Now that is, if any of you have done the long form, you know that it does take quite a bit of time. Somewhere around 20 minutes or so to get through it once. So you're looking at a pretty sizable chunk of time if you're going through it twice. But I think that's, if that works well for your training, that was Yang Chung Fu's approach. So it has some good validity to it. Let's see. Within the course of the day, one should practice. So I should have kept reading. It says within the course of the day, one should practice 7 to 8 times, but at least one time per day. So it sounds like both morning, probably sometime around noon, and before you go to bed, you should be doing things, multiple times, up to 8 times, and at least one time per day. So looks like he gives quite a range there, which is nice. But at least that twice, getting up in the morning is probably an ideal thing. Then he goes on to say, however, avoid practicing after drinking alcohol and immediately after a meal. And this is, I think, a really good point. I have encountered some instructors who say you actually want to do your training after you've eaten because you're in more of a rest and digest state. And so that kind of calms you down and puts you in the right kind of Tai Chi mode to train. Um, I think from a digestive health perspective, that's probably not an ideal way of doing it. I'm sure they have their, reasons and they've had good experiences with that. If that's something that you're interested in trying out, of course you can try it. But I would recommend to my students, if I was teaching students right now, that people avoid eating or, like he says, drinking alcohol before training because that's basically taking a lot of your resources toward digestion. And if you try to pull those resources away from digestion so you can go through a long form or an extended bout of training, or you're thinking really hard on, what's the next movement? How do I do this movement? Am I doing it right? What are the principles that I'm missing here? Like if you're really working on learning those movements, I don't think that's going to be ideal for your digestion. So from two perspectives, I don't think that that's going to put you in the right state because your body's trying to digest, it's trying to rest, it's not trying to be active. That's going to pull away from your training, and your training, because it's requiring more energy from the body, is going to pull away from your digestion. So I think I agree with Yang Chung Fu on that for sure. I think don't train after eating, at least half an hour, but longer if you can. Not medical advice, just good general common sense there. So let's see. Then he goes on to talk about the place of practice. So he says, place of practice, garden, courtyard, or large hall with good air circulation and plenty of light is suitable. Avoid direct drafts. And this is something that I think is very important to keep in mind with Taiji training. Avoid direct drafts and strong wind and places that are cold, damp, and musty. Since the breathing deepens as the body undergoes exercise, strong drafts and damp air may penetrate the body to the internal organs, and one will easily fall ill. So this is something that it looks really cool to do pictures and videos of like training on cliffs next to the beach or training at the beach where it's really windy, or on the mountaintop and there's wind whipping around like crazy. And like those are very fun looking things, very cool things, but those are definitely not ideal places to be training. If you are training somewhere that's very windy, if you're training somewhere that's very cold, or cold and windy or wet, like training out in the rain, looks super cool on videos, but not an ideal place to be training. Um, Yang Chung Fu's idea of training in a garden courtyard or in a large hall, I get that that's like, I don't have those options available to me to train. Very few people, I would say, do have those options available. If you do have those options, great. Like make use of those things. But if you don't, I would say, try to keep the temperature pretty moderate, avoid the drafts, dress comfortably, use common sense with those things, but don't do training in extreme weather, extreme wind, extreme cold. So more words of wisdom from Yang Chung Fu. Let's see. And there's also this idea in Chinese medicine, and I'm not a Chinese medicine practitioner, so I only know what I have been told by Chinese medicine practitioners, but this idea of cold invasion of the body, and it comes with its whole host of um, problems that it can cause. And it's not something that we really consider in Western medicine, I would say, but it is definitely something that's worth paying attention to. I do work at a Chinese medicine clinic part time, and there are a lot of people that come through that the Chinese medicine doctor identifies as, yeah, that's, what's going on is cold invasion kind of a thing. And that's not super uncommon in the Pacific Northwest because we do get a lot of cold, damp weather. Um, and so all the more reason to pay attention to where you're training and the environment you're training in. So let's see. Then he goes on to talk about basically like appropriate clothing. So I'm not going to go into that right now. I think that we can go into it if you guys are interested out there, and if not, that's fine. You can of course read it on your own. But I did want to bring up those perspectives of Yang Chung Fu in training environment, in training timing and amount of training per day, just as kind of a traditional approach to training. And so I hope that was useful for some of you to hear that perspective. I also want to bring up, in the last video, I did talk about a series of videos put out by Dr. Andrew Huberman from Stanford School of Medicine and Dr. Andy Galpin, who basically talk about kind of all things like physical training. And if you are interested in learning more about how to balance your training so that you make sure you're not overtraining and you give yourself adequate recovery time, I think that's a great resource, and I'd highly recommend you go check that out. If you are feeling that you're exhausted after training, or maybe don't feel better after training, I think that would be a good resource to see if maybe you are a bit overtrained. So with that, I'm going to wrap this up. I'll check the comments one more time over here, see if there's anything new. It doesn't look like it. Let's refresh the page. Wait for it to load here, and there it is. No new comments. Okay. If any of you watching have any comments, go ahead and drop them in the comments for the live stream. And if there are no comments or questions, then I'm going to wrap this up. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Thank you for your interest in Tai Chi and Qigong, and for your support of this channel and what I do here. Thank you all for the comments too, letting me know that you are getting something out of the videos that I do and enjoying those. The whole point is for people to get things out of them. The whole point is for people who don't have access to a teacher to have some resources available without having to pay an arm and a leg to get access to those resources. So it's always a good feeling. It's a great thing to know that people are getting help from that. And those of you who are supporting this channel are supporting that. So thank you so much for that. And with that, I'm going to call it a day. Have a wonderful evening all. Stay safe and healthy out there. And thanks for watching.